This episode of the Future of Work podcast is brought to you by ServiceNow. Today's workforce expects consumer-grade service experiences, but HR is too busy manually responding to repetitive employee inquiries, leading to lengthy resolution times and frustrated workers. With ServiceNow, you make service delivery more efficient for HR and provide fast, personalized employee service, even for cases that require action from other departments. This year, Forbes also named ServiceNow the world's #1 most innovative company. I've also personally known Pat Waters, who's the Chief Talent Officer at ServiceNow for several years, and I'm always impressed and inspired by the work she's doing in the HR space. According to their CEO, John Donahoe, not only is ServiceNow helping to make the world of work better for people, but they're leading by example in using their own technology and platform to drive a truly digital and employee-centric experience within their organization. You can learn more by visiting servicenow.com/HR. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter to get access to the podcast episodes right when they are released, along with transcripts, free training videos I create, and a bunch of other fun stuff. You can do that at thefutureorganization.com/newsletter.
You're the driver of your work. You're the driver of your development. You're the driver of your successes. You're the driver of your learnings. And that means that as a team member at Magellan, and I'm going to use a word that's really overused, but you're empowered. You have the power to make things happen for yourself and for our company. So if you have a question, ask it. So if you wonder something, tee that up. Someone else is probably wondering it. So if you feel like you have a gap in your development, go find the resources for it. So if you have an issue, say with a leader, then it's your job to go say, hey, this is a gap for me. Can we talk about it? Right? So it's, in a way, it busts up the hierarchy of my leader will tell me what to do, when to do it. Not that all hierarchies are that way, because they're not, but sitting back and waiting to be told, really you have the power and the ability to move and to make the right things happen.
That's Caskie Lewis-Clapper, the Chief Human Resource Officer at Magellan Health, a Fortune 500 company with around 10,000 employees. Caskie has been with Magellan for almost 20 years, so she has seen the organization change a lot since she first started there. My conversation with Caskie today touches on quite a few important topics, including the importance of employees owning their relationship with the organization, helping people navigate change, how Magellan was on the cutting edge of flexible work back in the early 90s, and what mindsets and skills Magellan looks for in potential employees. You will also learn who Vern and Rita are and what changes they are bringing to Magellan.
I think what's different now is everybody has to be a digital citizen. And so every single person, no matter what their job is, has to take ownership for learning new ways of doing things. I think that is much more significant now than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
This is Jacob Morgan, best-selling author, speaker, and futurist. Welcome to the Future of Work podcast, where every week I speak with C-level executives, business leaders, and authors to explore how the workplace is changing and what the future of work is going to look like. The goal of this show is to give you the insights, the ideas, and the inspiration to help future-proof your career and your organization. If you want to get access to more content, such as podcast transcriptions and information on working with me or having me keynote your next event, you can visit thefutureorganization.com. If you get a few seconds, please rate the podcast on iTunes or whatever your preferred channel is. It really helps the show, and I personally appreciate it since the podcast does take quite a bit of effort to produce. In case you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or working with me, my email is jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Lastly, I launched a new community called The Future If, which is a network of business leaders, authors, and futurists, some of whom are podcast guests, who explore what our future can look like if certain technologies, ideas, approaches, and trends actually happen. Each week, we explore a new topic, which ranges from autonomous vehicles, AI and automation, leadership and management, biohacking, and anything and everything in between. If you want help figuring out hype from reality and are interested in having deeper conversations about the future, then I encourage you to visit thefutureif.com. Thanks for coming along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy the Future of Work podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Future of Work podcast. My guest today is Caskie Lewis-Clapper. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Magellan Health. Caskie, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. It's great to be here.
So before we jump into the fun conversation and talk about all the cool stuff that you guys are working on, why don't we start with a little bit of background information about you and Magellan Health. So what is it that you do there? And for people that are not familiar with Magellan Health, what does the company do?
Okay. Well, I'll start with what our company does. We're an innovative specialty solutions organization. So we provide care management for the fastest growing and most complex areas of healthcare, including special populations, complete pharmacy benefits, and other specialty carve-outs. I like to think of it as the right care at the right time in the least invasive way, and we work relentlessly to make that happen for our customers and our members.
Well, that's a simple explanation. And how many employees do you guys have?
We have about 10,000 team members.
Oh, wow. So definitely a good size organization. And then what about you? What does your role consist of as the Chief Human Resource Officer there?
Well, I'm essentially, I think of it as being accountable for creating workforce capability so that our business can be successful and people in it can be successful and we can execute on our strategies.
That's what ideally the Chief Human Resource Officer should be doing. So sounds like you're definitely helping Magellan Health kind of evolve and think about the future and talent and people, obviously. You guys have been going through a pretty interesting, I guess you could call it a transformation or an evolution over the past few years. Can you maybe share a little bit about why you guys are going through this transformation, what it looks like, and some of the things that you guys have been working on?
Sure. I guess I would start first with our industries going through a huge transformation. And of course, our behaviors and our work has to mirror what's going on in the industry. So I actually have been with the organization, are you sitting down? Almost 20 years.
Wow.
And
two decades.
It truly has been 4 different companies so far. And that's part of what I really love about being here. So as the industry changes and as the needs of our customers and our members change, we too change. And in some cases, and I'd say most recently, the transformation we've been driving and leading the way. And it's been one of the most exciting times. So, and it's no surprise most companies are going through transformational change right now because the world of work is changing. But it's always driven by a business strategy that needs to change, look different, generate different outcomes. So you can't watch the news without understanding what's going on in healthcare. We know our population is aging. We know what the healthcare needs are. And, we have to continue to look for better ways.
You mentioned that the world of work is changing. Can you talk about some of the things that you're paying attention to and some of the ways that you're seeing it change?
Absolutely. I like to think of the changes that are happening now as truly exponential and based on technology actually being ahead of everything else. And that's just getting faster. We've always implemented change from a human perspective by planning the change, working the change, measuring the change, all of those sort of models that we grew up with in the 90s and the 80s. And what's really amazing now is it's not like that at all. It's here's a capability. How do we utilize that to exponentially create capability for our people, for our processes, for our systems, for our organization, and for the industry that we're in? So it's a really different new thing from my perspective in the last 5 years or so that's taken hold and that's helping us really rapidly change the way that we work.
What about as far as like workplace practices go? I'm sure we can all remember a time not too long ago, there was a lot of hierarchy, a lot of outdated technologies, bureaucracy, ways of working. Have you seen, not just in Magellan Health, but just kind of in the world of work, just how we think about work change?
Absolutely. And that's actually what gives me the most energy of all. The landscape used to be that you had a role within a hierarchy and you had sort of an outline of where you played and what your work was. And if you take yourself out of that and get rid of what I like to call the trappings of a role and think about pure talent and think about a clear vision and think about being able to be fluid and agile in making things happen for your customers and members, that's the landscape we're playing in now. So it changes everything necessarily.
Very, very different world for sure. And so you mentioned you've been at Magellan Health for 20 years. So when you first started, was it a very different company? Was it like all cubicles, very conservative, very different environment than it is now?
Well, I think it's absolutely an incredibly different environment than it is now. And I think one of the pivotal points of change, which was actually soon after I joined, we have associates located across the country and in other countries. And we were trying to recruit for a position that was really, really difficult to fill. And I asked the question, do they have to be here? We were headquartered in Columbia, Maryland at the time, and we just could not in that demographic find the person to fit that role. And I remember the leader saying, yeah, I need to work with them. I need to be able to walk down the hall and talk with them. And so we let that sit with us for a bit and we challenged it. And we said, really, we want the best talent. We don't care where they're sitting. Let's focus on the work to be done, not a geographic location. And so that was about, early 90s. So not a lot of companies were doing that yet. And that actually started the trajectory of us being a very results-oriented work environment. And what that means is you're not focused on where someone sits. You're not focused on their hierarchy. You do have things in place, right? So that we know what we need to do, when we need to do it, who we're doing it with. But you're really focused on what's the work that needs to get done and how do we assemble the right people at the right time to make it happen in the most, efficient way. So we now have over 40% of our team members work from their homes.
Wow, that's a huge number. And I'm glad you actually brought up workplace flexibility because I still actually talk to a lot of organizations who are kind of on the fence around it. The rationale for why workplace flexibility or working from home is bad, from what I'm hearing, is that a lot of executives are saying, we want to drive collaboration, we want to drive innovation, we want these people to be in the office, seeing each other's faces and working together. And if you don't have that, then you can't have that collaboration and the innovation. So how do you respond to maybe some people who are skeptical of workplace flexibility or who are, kind of on the fence, not sure if they should be doing it?
Yep. Great question. And I've dealt with that question a lot over the years as we've worked to transform our workplace. And we continue to. My first ask of anyone who says, I need to be in a room with someone in order to collaborate is, how can we strengthen your capabilities so that you can build collaboration on Zoom? or in a model where you have an incredibly clear vision and you have a cadence where you see your team certain number of times a year in person and a certain number of times a year on Zoom. So in my opinion, it takes incredibly strong leadership to build collaboration. And kicking back and relying on being able to do that just because you have everybody in one place is phoning it in my book. So it's the first thing is it's a challenge to leaders around busting up that mental model and asking the question, how do you truly build collaboration? Well, you've got a clear vision. You've got a common understanding of the work that needs to be done. You've got respect and transparency. You've hopefully built a way in to build relationships and have fun. You can do all of that, not going into the same building every day, X number of days a week for X number of hours a day. And my contention is that if I want the best talent, the very best talent is focused on their life first and their work second, and they're integrated into a flow. So when I say we'd like you to join our organization and I'm not going to ask you to move, it's a huge win.
I suppose the assumption also there is that just because people are in the same room together means that they're going to collaborate when that's not always the case, right? I mean, if people are resentful that they needed to commute into the office, if people are not connected to the organization, if they don't feel like their managers have their best interest at heart, it doesn't matter if you stick them in the room together. They're just not going to want to bring forward their ideas. They're not going to want to share anything. They're just going to be angry that they have to be in the office.
Well, and that's exactly right, Jacob. And even more, I think importantly is you can get everybody in a room, but if the leader's not clear about what they're there to do, and if there is no plan around how to organize to get it done, then we've probably all been in meetings like that in our lifetime where we're thinking, why am I here? Now, I don't believe it has to be an either or. So I don't want to definitely fall back into you either are in person or you're remote. And by the way, we've got to come up with a new word to describe that because it sounds bad. And remote isn't remote. It's being focused on the work to be done and not necessarily sitting in the same place. But I think that I think a mix is ideal, where you can have a face-to-face 1 or 2 times a year or 3 times a year, depending on what the work is. Let the work drive when you need to be in a room together. For example, doing design thinking for 3 days. Let the work define when you have an in-person team meeting versus a Zoom meeting. Instead of just starting off with the default of we're all in the same place.
I like that approach. Let the work kind of define the environment that you should be in. I like to ask this question for a lot of executives that have been in the workplace for a while, that have kind of seen organizations evolve. When you were to think back, or if you were to think back to one of the first few jobs that you've had, do you remember where it was, the work that you were doing? And are there any workplace practices that you can remember from back then that have since disappeared?
My first work was at a company called General Physics, which is thriving today. It's an amazing organization. And I was working largely in the nuclear and fossil power plant industries doing human performance research. So my guess is they're still doing that, but probably doing it very differently. I do remember, and this will date me, that's where I got my first computer, the green screen. And then, when we figured out that you could send emails, to people sitting down the hall from your cube, it was just this really new thing. So now you know how old I am, but it was a really interesting time because the second that computer hit people's desks, everything changed. And it was another example of technology necessarily causing humans to catch up, if that makes any sense.
Oh, totally. I'm actually going to ask you to expand on that a little bit more, because a lot of people listening to this, I'm sure some people can remember a time before email, before computers were introduced, before cell phones. But for most, or for a lot of people listening, they are perhaps not familiar of what that might have been like, me included, right? I mean, I have never worked without a computer, without the internet. I do remember dial-up. I do remember fax machines and stuff like that. But prior to that, this technology is kind of a lot of what I grew up with and a lot of what I've known. So what was it like how did work get done? No computer, no internet. I mean, the mind boggles, right? How did anything how did you communicate? How did you stay in touch? How did you interact with customers, with prospects? How did you keep track of your people and the data and reviews? Like, how did all this stuff get done?
So I think a lot of it really was done in the same way. We just used different tools, right? So you made phone calls instead of doing Zoom video conference. I was doing instructional systems design. So a lot of our work was photocopying transparencies and things like that, right? So, and typesetting presentations. And so really the best part about it is that was just wasted time when you think about it and you look at what you're able to do now and how quickly you're able to do it. And I would offer up that the same thing's going to happen in the next 5 years, which is so cool. Stuff we're spending time on now that we won't have to spend time on in a few years. So that's the best part of it, is recognizing that, it's changing still and will continue to, and indeed is speeding up. And that's all about creating capability of humans if we do it well and if we pay attention to the social aspects of it.
So you mentioned that even in 5 years, there will be things that we're not doing now. I don't know if you have any examples or thoughts of what some of those things might be, but I'm also just curious to get your general take on the role that technology will play in the future, because it seems like there are some people who are very optimistic, some people who are very scared and fearful. It sounds like you're more of an optimist, but maybe you can share your kind of thoughts on the role that you see technology playing in the coming years.
Sure. I am typically a glass is half full, but I'm also capable of being a critical evaluator. And I think sometimes we learn the most when things don't go well. And I've been through enough systems change in organizations to know that sometimes it is the worst, 6 or 9 months you've ever spent. And sometimes it goes really well and creates capability in a flip of a switch. So I think that I'll give an example of what I think we'll be ramping up on. We just stood up an analytics function in the last couple of years in HR. Most HR functions didn't have that, right? And we're still learning, and it seems to take a really long time because we're so used to instant results. But I would love for leaders to have AI around how their talent might be feeling right now. And we have some of that now, right? So we do pulse surveys, and that has been an exponential change in terms of what leaders have at their fingertips to understand the pulse of what their team members are feeling and thinking. I think that's just going to ramp up even more. I look at the advancements that have been made. When we moved from what used to be called an HRIS system to a true HCM, or human capital management system. And I think the worst thing that can happen is you leverage this technology in a way that you were leveraging the old technology, when it necessarily needs to change almost everything about the way you think, plan, and work. So you can take a tool, put it in place, and not do anything different and not gain any capability if you don't challenge your mental models around how you're leveraging that technology, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I mean, I always say a tool is a tool, right? I mean, it's basically how you use it, how you think about it, And if you introduce a new piece of technology, but you use it the same way that you use the old technology, then kind of like, what's the point?
Right. That's exactly right. And honestly, I feel like that's where a lot of folks start from. And we have to constantly be reminding ourselves and reminding each other that the whole purpose of this is to actually transform what we're doing, not just make it a little faster.
Yeah, it's not slight improvements, but like you said, a full transformation or kind of an evolution. Well, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more internally about what you're doing at Magellan Health, because I understand there are two interesting programs that you have launched. One is called Vern and one is called Rita. So can you give us a little bit of background and information about Vern and Rita, what those are, why they even got introduced?
Absolutely. And you'll hear me smiling because it's actually been just a really fun and transformative way for us to change the way we're working at Magellan. A couple of years ago, we had an HR contact center, which many, many companies do. And we still have a contact center, but we don't have people answering phones, answering questions. And there's good with that, and there's hard with that. But in order to get there, we actually worked with a company, ServiceNow, to purchase technology and create a virtual employee resource center, which is what VERN stands for. Now we're a high touch organization. We're in healthcare. The people that I work with day to day are very, very focused on the human aspect of everything, which I love about this company. But I absolutely believed there was a way to do this that was not cold and that was transformational in terms of direct access to information. So we actually put the ServiceNow software in place. And the best part about it, in my mind, is that we piloted it with a group of employees from across the company. And we said, you have to help us build this database. So we already started the change management just by asking them to be a part of it. And we populated the database with every question and answer known to mankind that we had ever had. And then we honed it and we worked with our employees to make sure, did you get your question answered? Did it make sense? What needs to be different about it? So one of the things that was really unique about this was partnering with our customers to design it and to define it and to get it in place. The other thing that we did was we gave it a face. So we ran a contest with our associates across the country, and we said, this is what this is. This is what you've helped us build. What do we want to call it? And so Vern is the name of our system, our virtual employee resource network. And Vern has a face, and one of our team members actually had a doll made up that looks like Vern. Our technology team members, my colleagues over there, were doing the same thing with the ServiceNow platform for basically the technology contact center. And so they kind of did a similar process, and they ended up doing a contest, and the name of it was Rita. So the thing that is so amazing is it could have been a source of heartache for our team members across the organization. And indeed, for some, it was a learning curve around, what do you mean I can't talk to somebody? And we've done a lot of work around, wouldn't you rather not wait for someone to call you back and just find the information yourself? But it turned into this huge, wonderful thing where our team members across the country helped us build it, implement it, and we essentially, eliminated the contact center as we knew it. We have a different function that works on some of the pieces, but the net is we don't have call center, and it's quick, and our team members get smarter faster. They learn where to look and how to look for things, and they don't have to wait for answers. And just a little funny story. We have Facebook at Work that we use for our social network. And on Halloween, I was on there and I clicked on a photo, and it was 2 employees dressed up as Vern and Rita.
That's funny. They're really bringing it to life.
They totally brought it to life. So it truly has been transformational. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about because really at the base of it, if you think about it, and at the base of results-oriented work environment is, as an individual, I own myself, I own my work, I own my decisions. I'm driving. And so if I'm driving, it makes all the sense in the world that I have a technology solution to be able to get what I need exactly when I need it, just how I need it. And that's exactly what Vern and Rita do.
So just to make sure I understand, so these are employee resource centers, kind of like an internal knowledge base where if you have a question, you basically go to this resource space and you can find answers to any question. I mean, we see this a lot for customers, right? So it's kind of a similar concept and idea. That's exactly right. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. And then so as a result of this, you eliminated the employee call center?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what if somebody wants to find something that they can't find in Vern or Rita?
So there's a couple different things that you can do, but the net is if you can't get something in Vern, there's a way for you to be able to indicate that, and then that goes to a ticketing center, and then we do reach outs.
Got it. So there is kind of like another path that people can go down if they need to.
Right. But you know what we try to do first?
What?
Oftentimes, it almost never happens that people can't find it. And so instead of calling them, we'll say, put this in Vern. We'll give them the phrase or the thing. And so we're trying to teach them, right, how to look for things. Because sometimes they barely try, and then they, want us to call them. So,
well, that's important. And instead of, and this is kind of in leadership too, right? I mean, sometimes employees ask leaders a question and a leader will know the answer, but if you just give employees the answer, that doesn't really help them. You want to teach them to be able to know where to go to get the answer and how to think about it. So I love your approach of not just answering directly right away, but saying, hey, why don't you try typing this in and you'll find it yourself. So I really, really do like that approach. So as a kind of real life or practical example, what would I use Vern or Rita for? So I'm an employee at Magellan Health. What kind of stuff would I be looking for?
How do I get my employment verified because I'm trying to buy a house? What benefits do I have for maternity? When will my, tax forms be due or be sent to me?
And you can actually type that stuff in.
Yeah, you can put there. I don't know what you wouldn't put in there. Honestly, anything that you have a question about in terms of your relationship with Magellan as an employer, there's probably something that is helpful for you to have direct access to, and that's been built into the database.
Very cool. Well, I think that's actually a good transition into just general, what is it like to work at Magellan Health? So you have 10,000 employees there. Are the offices cubicles? Are they open spaces? Do you have, free beer and free food for everybody? What's kind of like the Magellan Health environment like?
So I would just offer up a results-oriented work environment and use that as the base, right? Every individual owns themselves, owns their relationship with Magellan as an employer. Whether they're in a technical leadership role or not, they're leading themselves. What that means is they're accountable for being digital citizens. So, for example, when they join the company, they go through an online learning portal to understand who we are, what we do, and how they fit into that. and they're introduced to career development resources and introduced to the concept that they're driving it. Your leader's there to support you. Your leader's there to help you understand the work that needs to be done and changes as changes occur with the work that needs to be done. Your leader's there to help you with what you need help with, but the net is you're driving. And so if you use that as the base and you think about our work locations, that's why it's easy for so many of our team members to work from, a home office in Duluth, if that's where the best talent for that role sits. The day-to-day of individuals in our organization can vary and do vary. So we have contact centers for our customers and our members concentrated in several sites in the country. They're larger footprint offices. And we are in the middle of another transformation where we're creating offices that are reflective of the workplace of the future. I think a lot of companies have moved down this track very, very quickly. We're doing it as we go. So the goal is that we have footprint offices, physical office space that is largely hoteling offices. Lots of collaboration space and spaces where you can go do work that needs to be confidential or more private. So, for example, we have an office in Connecticut right now that our facilities group is working to redesign, and they started out with a questionnaire of what's the work that you do here? How many people are in here every day? How many people are in here 3 times a week? Who are the people that are in here? Are they in team meetings? What percentage of time are they in team meetings? Are they on Zoom calls? What percentage of time are they on Zoom calls? And then we take that back and say, here's what this office site's going to look like based on this work to be done. So the idea is that we have lots of open space, lots of natural light, that we have collaboration space is what we call it. So room for walls to come up or down depending on group size, that it's technology enabled, right? So you can do Zoom from anywhere at all times. You can do team Zooms, you can do individual Zooms. And we don't offer up beer. We don't offer up lots of free anything. The net is we're a healthcare company, so we're really focused on, lar bars and almonds and fruit and things like that. But it's not a model that's built on creating a reason for people to come into an office other than the work to be done, if that makes sense.
It does. It does, for sure. And now let's take 90 seconds to hear from our sponsor, ServiceNow, and their Chief Talent Officer, Pat Waters.
Every company has an employee experience, those intentional and those organically created. For CHRO, you start by crafting your vision and you look at those moments that matter. They look at what is the business problem or opportunity they're trying to achieve, and they craft their talent strategies to not only achieve that goal, but actually to set themselves apart differentially in the marketplace to attract great talent. What I like to look at with my peers is how do you automate the processes that are repetitive? How do you create insights into tools and technology that allow me to think ahead, not 2 steps, maybe 5 steps? How do we create tools that create less friction for me as an employee that makes me free up opportunity and time to do things that I love to do? That is changing the way people do work. CHROs are helping redefine how talent works today. The benefits of intentionally crafting an employee experience is high. It's retention, it's engagement, it's better productivity, it's unlocking discretionary effort. So if you free up some of my time, and I'm excited about my job and my work and collaborating, then I'm going to use that extra cycle to help others be successful. If you don't do that, you will lose that talent that you crafted for such a long time. The most successful CHROs today are looking around the corners, and I can't wait to see what they find.
If you want to learn more, please visit servicenow.com/HR. And now back to the podcast. You touched on something that I wanted to ask you about, and that was this idea of employees owning it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see if we can expand on that a little bit. So can you unpack that a little bit more for listeners? When you say you own it, as an employee at Magellan Health, so what exactly do you own, and how does that manifest? I mean, I don't know if you have any examples of what that might look like, but I love the messaging. I'm just curious to learn more about what that looks like.
Sure. Well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, just to kind of go back to the anchor on this, it's a belief that every individual is inherently excellent. It's a belief in abundance from a leadership perspective, right? So win-win. We're all here to raise each other up, and we're all here to focus on the work to be done. So that said, you're the driver of your work. You're the driver of your development. You're the driver of your successes. You're the driver of your learnings. And that means that as a team member at Magellan, and I'm going to use a word that's really overused, but you're empowered. You have the power to make things happen for yourself and for our company. So if you have a question, ask it. So if you wonder something, tee that up. Someone else is probably wondering it. So if you feel like you have a gap in your development, go find the resources for it. So if you have an issue, say with a leader, then it's your job to go say, hey, this is a gap for me. Can we talk about it? Right? So it in a way, it busts up the hierarchy of my leader will tell me what to do, when to do it. Not that all hierarchies are that way, because they're not, but sitting back and waiting to be told, really you have the power and the ability to move and to make the right things happen. So it's a philosophy, but all of the things that we've put in place are based on that philosophy. And it doesn't mean, we're an organization with 10,000 team members. You're going to have some leaders who have more traditional ideas around hierarchy. And you know what? We're a work in progress. So we're continuing to work that. It doesn't mean the leader's not accountable ultimately for the output, because we are as leaders, right? But it does mean that you aren't sitting around waiting for an assessment once a year for your leader to tell you how you're doing.
Let's say I'm an employee at Magellan Health. I don't know, I've been there for maybe 1 or 2 years, and I feel like I want to advance or grow or learn something else. So in that kind of a situation, do I have the ability to kind of take ownership of that, or do I just go to my manager and say, hey, I want to learn something?
You can take it. We actually call it take charge of your career. And you can click on a link and go into a site and work through all the things that a consultant would work through with you and asking you about where you are and where you want to be and what makes sense for you. And then you have access to almost unlimited ability to take classes or to listen to podcasts or to watch a webinar or to partner with someone from another part of the company and put on a webinar. I mean, that's the beauty of this. There's no end to it. It's not the course catalog will be published twice a year, and these are the programs that will be available to you. Now, of course, we have core programs that are available, but it's just not linear like that, which I think it's very cool and very different from how it was, say, 20 years ago.
Oh, for sure. I suppose this also puts a lot of accountability on employees, because in most organizations that are a little bit more hierarchical and bureaucratic, it's sort of like you're unhappy and all you can really do is complain, and a lot of employees say they don't feel empowered, they can't really do anything. But at Magellan Health, it's almost a little bit like a tough love approach. It's kind of like you can't have excuses for anything. Don't tell me you can't learn something. Don't tell me that you're upset about something. You have the opportunity to fix and change things, and you need to step up and take ownership and try to make that change happen instead of just being quiet.
I think that's true. I would lace that with, it's so important to care for each other and to understand that some days we are going to be upset about something, or some days we aren't going to be able to learn something, or some days it's not always clear what it is we need to do, right? So you need people to think with to help sort that out. And I would hope we create the kind of environment to make that happen, and that our associates create that for each other. I mean, most of the time, if you ask a team member at Magellan why they're here, they almost always talk about two things: our reason for existing, right? And the purpose, the vision that we have as a business. And two, the people they're sitting next to and or working with virtually. And so, yes, it is a little bit of tough love, but it's also done with compassion and respect and a ton of collaboration.
How do you make sure you have those people? So what are the skills that you look for? Because not everybody, I suppose, is comfortable in that, right? Some people like being managed. Some people like being told what to do. Some people just like not having to think about their jobs or careers, and they just want somebody to say, hey, do this, do that, do this.
Right.
So how, what are the skills, the mindsets, the criteria that you look for in an individual at Magellan Health to make sure that they have that accountability and that they're able to own it?
I think it's a great question, and it's part of what we spend time on when we're interviewing team members and or considering moving team members into different roles. And I think that there are some roles where you are able to sort of just know what the work is and do it, and really not have to, do a lot of, driving yourself, right? And I think that's okay. I think what's different now is everybody has to be a digital citizen. And so every single person, no matter what their job is, has to take ownership for learning new ways of doing things. And I think that is much more significant now than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
And this is not just at Magellan Health. This is, you think, all employees need this?
Absolutely. When you think about the ecosystem of an organization, it is not just a discrete business unit anymore, right? There's so much connection and collaboration within and outside of organizations. I mean, look at the companies that we partner with to be able to do things like launch Vern or have a human capital management system, right? Companies are interconnected in so many ways that they never were before. And the same is true for our team members. So even if you're in a job where 80% of the time you know what it is and you don't really have to do a lot of driving, you still need to work in a very, very different work environment now. So it's hitting everybody. And I will tell you that, some people very naturally love learning new things, and some people struggle with it. And it doesn't make them bad people. It just means we got to come up with a different approach, and they've got to work with us on what can work for them. It's a journey in meeting people where they are and helping them move to the next place, if you will.
For people listening to this, because I think that was actually fantastic advice on being this kind of perpetual learner or digital citizen. For people that are listening to this, that are employees at other organizations, that are trying to figure out how to stay relevant, how to add value to their organization, do you have any advice on how they can start doing these things, on what they should be learning, what skills are you encouraging, just anything that listeners can take away that maybe they can use in their own careers and their own jobs?
Absolutely. And now's a great time because you can, look up a TED Talk in 0.2 seconds, right? And explore any topic you want. You can listen to a podcast. You just Google what you want to hear about and what you want to explore. You can, the other thing I think that's awesome is that no one's doing the same thing for 30 or 40 years. Even if you're with the same company, your role is so different, right? So if there's some other area you want to explore, some sort of true part of yourself that is a true talent that maybe you've gotten away from using lately, and you want to continue to hone it and grow it and maybe even move into a different kind of a role, then go spend time with that subject matter in your personal time or as you're learning. And the best part about work, any work that needs to be done, there are so many dimensions to it. So to really get creative around how can I strengthen this skill and this subject matter while I'm doing this work, right? I mean, there's ways to do that. So you can grow new skills in your current role. You can develop older skills that have gone a little bit, complacent. You can explore completely new things. You're probably going to be doing 5 or 6 different types of roles or careers in your time working. So why not, there's no time like the present. If you're interested in something, check it out.
Yeah.
It only makes you better at what you're doing now.
I totally agree. I think people forget that, during the course of an average career now, you're going to have to reinvent yourself several times. And you can't just rely on everything that the company teaches you or everything that schools teach you to be relevant and successful. You kind of have to take that accountability. And as you mentioned, we've never had more resources than now. So really no excuses.
Exactly. But, I always say it depends on where you are on a given day. And there's some days where people are just tired of learning. And I totally get that.
Yeah.
So take a break.
It can be exhausting.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you guys are going through a lot of change, and change is not always easy. Change can be uncomfortable for a lot of individuals, and change can also be hard to manage for organizations. So as you've been transforming, I thought maybe you could share a couple examples of where change has been really hard for people to grasp. Like, I would assume with Vern and with Rita, that was probably hard for a lot of people, where they can no longer call somebody up. They now have to go to a website. So first are there any other examples that you can share of where employees have had a hard time grasping change at Magellan Health? And the second part to that question is, how do you help people navigate change inside of Magellan Health and maybe even outside of Magellan Health? What can other people do?
Okay, so to answer the first question, the example that comes to mind around people having a very hard time with change, actually with Vern and Rita, there were some populations that struggled because they sort of didn't want to. And in my experience, once you can show them what it does, and walk them through it, they catch on and they start doing it, right? They all do it with Apple, right? They all have an iPhone and they're all doing it, with the things in their personal life. So, nothing's perfect, and sometimes the answer's not in the system, and so we have to learn from that and get really quick at making those changes. But the hardest one that comes to mind, there's 2. One is consumer-driven benefits, and one is the performance management system. Consumer-driven benefits necessarily put the onus on the individual to understand their health, to understand the healthcare system, which is incredibly complex, and to understand pretty high-level math around what's best to do out of pocket, what's best to do premium, et cetera, et cetera. That's a multiple year-long education, and we're still doing it, and I think we'll be doing it for a really long time. But we basically took individuals who were a part of health and wellness programs where they were told what to do, when to do it, and someone took care of all that for them, and then asked them to be consumer directed, right? That means you're going to drive it. You're going to make these decisions. You're going to learn about all this. The other ones with the performance management system, we actually, like many companies, challenged our mental models on the old performance management systems that we had in place. And we did a survey with our team members, and we said, does this add value to you? And a staggeringly large number said no. And then we looked at the comp side and we said, well, the idea is that your performance review feeds into the comp, but there wasn't necessarily a really strong correlation between how leaders were rating their team members and what they were awarding them from a comp perspective. So we said, let's change it. So we stopped doing it and we moved to performance connections. And it's a system that is very much focused on the work that needs to be done, and it's fluid and it's ongoing. But the individual owns making sure they understand what they're accountable for, and if not, initiating those conversations with their leader. Whereas in a performance management system, it used to be that, your leader gave you your goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe you can expand on that a little bit more. So with connections,
yep.
Instead of the leader giving you your goals, so let's say I'm the employee, you're my manager. So how is it different? What am I doing now as the employee that I didn't do before?
I'm taking ownership of understanding what the work to be done is. And if I have questions, I'm asking them. And if I need feedback, I'm asking for it. And as a leader, I'm paying attention and making sure I'm giving feedback as needed. I'm making sure that I'm changing objectives and goals in collaboration with individuals based on what's happening with our work. And at the end of the year, I'm not going to painstakingly go through and give you feedback because I've been giving it to you all year long.
Got it.
It changes the nature of conversations that happen ongoing, if you will.
Yeah.
It's a tough change for some.
Yeah, I can imagine. And really curious, before we talk about how to deal with change, so how do raises come into effect? Do raises and benefits, or not benefits, do raises and bonuses still happen once a year, even though the feedback is ongoing? Or is there a different structure for how employees might get a raise or a bonus?
I think that it's a great question, and it's so important for them to be connected. The net is we still do merit on an annual basis. And in my mind, merit is base pay, and it's based on services provided by team members, right? You want to pay people competitively for the services they provide the organization. And if they're performing and in good standing with the organization, they should be eligible for a merit. And we look at something we call comp ratio, which is where they fall in the market. And then you consider performance, where they fall in the market, and that determines the merit increase. From a bonus perspective, we have a couple different programs in place. We have a service excellence reward program for our frontline staff that pays out quarterly based on just-in-time and real targets that they have in their business departments. They're managed by their leaders. And what I like about that is it gives our associates very, not once a year, but quarterly opportunity for bonus based on the work that they're doing, which I think is really important. We have a management bonus program that is an annual program that is very similar to, I think, other publicly traded management bonus programs. And so, it pays out on an annual basis if indeed you hit the targets.
Got it. Okay, that all makes sense. Okay, so let's get back to the second part of that question, was getting people to deal with change or helping them navigate change. So whether it is about the new performance connections program or about workplace design or anything really, how do you get people to be comfortable with that change? And how do you deal with people that are just like, nah, not going to change. Sorry, not going to happen?
So I'll start off with respect, and that no behavior is good or bad in reaction to a change. Because the second an organization makes a decision that if you don't want to be a digital citizen, for example, or if you don't want to drive your own work, you're not a good employee. You've just put the nail in the coffin of that person ever being willing to consider something different. So, in the old days, you've probably heard companies say you either get on or off the bus. I hated that.
Yeah.
Like, well, no one's going to tell you they're off the bus. But you know what? They are. So let's get real. Every single one of us has stuff we want to do and we don't want to do. And it's really up to us on that given day what we're able to and willing to make happen. So respect and transparency and having the conversations about what's needed is really important, and not doing it in a I'm holier than thou way, right? And not doing it in a way that's judgmental to say, well, if you don't want to go get the information yourself, you're really not a good employee. I just don't buy it. If you walk into it with we're all in a certain place and our ability and our willingness to make change happen, let's just see if we can all move, right? And the second thing that I think is most important is you get what you accept. If you don't get the results that we need, then we have an issue. And we're not going to give up on the work we're here to do. We're not going to give up on achieving our vision as an organization. So if indeed it's not something you're able to do, we get that. Doesn't make you a bad person, but you're probably not going to be able to be successful here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does.
So you have to have almost a just discipline and unrelenting focus on we need to get those results.
Is there kind of a fine line between getting the results versus, I don't know, making sure that the human aspect stays in the organization? In other words, like, can you be too obsessed with results to the detriment of the organization or to the detriment of the employee?
I'm sure there's a way to do that. I see them as integrated and one and the same. Our results are very human. Our results are that our team members are learning and growing and are engaged and are doing meaningful work that they can be successful with. Our results are that our customers are getting the services they need from our organization. Our results are that our members are getting the right care at the right time in the least invasive way. So I don't see them as separate. And I see our results as very human.
Yeah. Yep. So when done properly, they should kind of align. Well, before I ask you some kind of fun questions about yourself, I thought maybe we could talk for maybe just 1 or 2 minutes about leadership, because it seems like for any kind of change, you need to make sure you have the right leaders in place, the right executives in place inside the organization. So inside of Magellan Health, can you talk about the importance that leadership plays? What are the skills or qualities that you look for in those leaders? And how are the leaders helping drive this change at Magellan?
Well, I mean, nothing happens without doing it through and with leaders. I would say that we are definitely going through a lot of change, just as most companies are in this day and age. And, I would first say there's a time and a place for all kinds of leaders. And as an organization, we always have to be looking at, do we have the right people matched up with the challenge? So as the industry changes and as the business change, we too have to change how we're leading. So if an organization's incredibly innovative and a startup, they're going to work pretty differently than an organization that maybe has been around a while, has established mature products and services. And as we all know, in this day and age, you have to have both of those things happening. So we went through a process a few years ago where we refreshed on our values. And they're not, I know we've been doing this for, however long I've been working. We've always been very focused on what's the compass or the values that we use to make sure we're hitting what we're trying to get done. If I think of leadership behaviors that we're looking for, our values just, really very naturally define them. So own it is one of our values. Deliver value and results. Care for each other and for our customers and our members. evolve. Learning is not an option. We've all got to continue to grow our skills and our abilities and our capabilities, because that's what our industry is demanding. And one of our values is stand tall, which is always do the right thing. So I can easily interview someone for a leadership role and fall back to those things and be able to understand whether or not they're a fit for us right now. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm trying to think if there's we have maybe like 1 minute. Is there anything else that you want people to know about Magellan Health, or any of the programs or initiatives that you guys have going on, before I jump into some fun rapid fire questions about you? or any last parting words of wisdom or advice for employees?
I would love that. I'd love to be able to say for our team members that this is a really hard time. And it is not just for Magellan, but for all companies. We're kind of in the middle of technology that's leapfrogged and trying to catch up from a human perspective. And we're asking everybody to deliver on today and plan for and be ready to execute on tomorrow. And they're two really different things. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, or you're feeling like you're not sure you can see the clear path, or you're feeling like you know there's so much ambiguity, you're probably right where you should be. Take a deep breath and know you're not alone.
All right. I love that advice. Don't freak out. But just know that this is kind of like the new, I don't know, would you call it the new normal? Like, this is kind of an okay area to be in.
Yeah, it's kind of where we are on that you are here map.
Yeah. Things are changing so quickly that it's going to be hard to be comfortable. You should always be a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So I think that's great advice. Well, to wrap up, I just had a couple fun rapid fire questions for you, starting off with, what has been your greatest business failure?
My greatest business failure. My greatest business failure was trying to implement an applicant tracking system with an organization that the day before go live went belly up. Oh,
well, that's going to make things kind of hard.
It was one of the worst things I've had to go through from a work perspective.
Yeah, I can imagine that not being very pleasant.
Yeah.
What was your most embarrassing moment at work?
My most embarrassing moment at work?
Yep.
Let's see. I would have to say my most embarrassing moment at work was when I once sent an email involving a situation with a third party and inadvertently sent it to them.
Oh, all right. That's a good one.
By the way, it opened up a good conversation, but that's not how I wanted to open up the conversation.
Yes. All right. That's a great one. What are you most proud of?
Honestly, my team here. I love to work with people who are way smarter than me, and I have been really lucky to get to work with my team here. I'm really proud of the work that they've done and they do. I'm not just saying that. They're really remarkable. They do a lot with a little, and they're innovative, and they care about each other. So,
well, go Magellan Health HR team. What has been the hardest or toughest business decision you've ever had to make?
So I'm having a hard time answering that, because I will tell you that if the vision is strong, the details work themselves out. So when I make a business decision, sometimes it will have a negative impact on an individual or a group of people or a division, or team members across the organization, for example. So helping them understand that sometimes we have to give something up in the pursuit of our overall vision can sometimes be tough. sometimes you have to make it, in other words, you can't make decisions based on making sure everybody's happy or everyone has what they need or every single career moves in the trajectory that they're wanting it. You have to make decisions based on what's the work to be done and what's our strategy in making that happen. Hopefully you can marry the two up most of the time. The hardest things for me are when they don't marry up and you have to move forward in a way that maybe derails someone from what they wanted to be doing, or, cut something across the board for all team members and you really wish you could do it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, and last couple for you. What's your favorite business or non-business book?
My favorite business or non-business book. Can I give two? So my favorite business book of, a few years ago, it's Exponential Organizations. And I'll credit our chief technology officer for having us all read it. It's so powerful, and it unfreezes you in terms of, or it unfroze me in terms of, no, this is really happening, and it's really fast, and it's really going to continue. So I just think that's a fabulous book.
And Salim Ismail was actually a podcast guest, so I'm glad you mentioned that. That was a good book.
He's fantastic. Yeah. So yeah. And then I would say one of my favorite non-work books is Confederacy of Dunces. So my lineage tracks through New Orleans, and it's an amazing book that sort of stays with me. But that's just one of many. I'm an avid reader, so there are so many. But I just spent a couple days in New Orleans, so that's top of mind.
Okay, and last two for you. Who is the best mentor you've ever had?
I've had a lot of great mentors, but it takes no time for the best mentor I ever had to pop in my head. Her name's Catherine Gaddy. She's a human factors person that I worked with at General Physics, PhD, brilliant woman, amazing human being who went out of her way to teach me about work and life and how they can be integrated, and who, above all others, taught me what amazing leadership looked like and felt like to someone who had the benefit of that.
Very cool. And very last question for you. If you were doing a different career, what do you think you would have ended up doing?
Probably teaching.
Anything in particular?
I would love to teach college, and I love the learning process. I actually coached high school boys track for 7 years when I was first started working because I had extra time on my hands, and I love the whole process of getting people and working with them toward their goals, and so I think teaching would probably be a great forum to be able to do something like that.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up. Where can people go to learn more or connect with you or Magellan Health or anything else that you want to mention?
Well, MagellanHealth.com is a great place to start if you want to learn more about our company. And I am on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jacob. It was fun.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest again has been Caskie Lewis-Clapper, the Chief Human Resource Officer at Magellan Health, and I will see all of you next week.